Live.
We are now live.
We are now live. I've just got to press a couple more buttons to go live. It's saying an error has occurred on that. I don't know what's happened there, but I think we're live now on LinkedIn. We are live on YouTube, but Facebook we are not. So I will just.
We're ready to go live. I'm just trying to do that there on Facebook. Go live. Go live. Yep, we're live on one Facebook.
Oh, well done. You've got the tech. Hello.
No, we can't go live in the community, it seems.
Okay, let's see. I know a man that can help this. Let me pop a message to Ben.
Say, help us, please.
Okay. Right. So, James, you crack on while I sort out the tech.
So today we are going to be discussing, some of you might, for those of you that are kind of keeping up on all things property, you might have seen some news this week that maybe kind of made you think, what the hell is this? Seems very new. This is very strange. The fact that estate agents are going to be charging up to £30 per viewing. I saw a headline, and when that cropped up as a overall headline, I thought, oh, wow, this is quite strange. This is very novel. This is something that's not been, I've not seen in the past 10 years of investing, and Caroline, who's been investing for a lot longer than me, also hasn't seen this either. Yeah. So we thought it would be quite a good topic for discussion, and to kind of see your views on it as well. So the fact that estate agents are going to be charging up to £30. Oh, we are now live, I think, on Facebook as well.
Are we?
Yeah, I've got a green tick on StreamYard here, so I think we're live everywhere.
Okay, great. Good to know, because it doesn't look as if it's live for me. That's fine. If you're in, you're in. All right. So I thought it was a little bit like shock headline news. Do you not think?
Yeah, it didn't feel like a legitimate, because from working with estate agents, from being kind of friends with estate agents in my investment areas, that would have filtered down to us before it would have hit mainstream news. You would have thought if this was going to be quite a widespread thing, and we'd not heard of it. We'd had no comments about it from our estate agents. Yet here we go, a news headline. I think it was in the Mirror. It was probably in the Deadly Mail as well. So it was very strange that it was coming out in the press before estate agents telling us this was the case.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's not until you dive a little bit deeper into the headlines, and I think this is true for a lot of media headlines, isn't it? It's like shock selling. It's all about, well, who is actually doing it, and is it actually happening now, or are they just talking about it? So you dived a little deeper into it, James, and what did you discover in your research?
I discovered that it was just this one estate agency. So it was an estate agency called View Rabbit, who I've never even heard of, if I'm being completely honest. I've never done a viewing with them, and they were going to be charging people £30. That was for homeowners, so for buyers and for potential renters, £30 per viewing, and it was to try and stop people from making an appointment and then not turning up to the appointment.
Okay, so the question is, if one agency is doing this, will the others follow? Will everyone catch on to this and think, oh, maybe this is an income stream generator for an estate agency business? What do you think? Do you think it will catch on?
I personally don't think it's going to catch on. I think, it's not a bad idea. The principle of it isn't a bad idea, because we know that there are loads of people that do book viewings, don't turn up because they've found another property or they're not interested, without telling the estate agency. So how could this potentially help estate agents? Well, for trusted buyers and renters, people that they know and work with, they're probably going to just say, well, that's fine. We know you, we trust you, we know you're going to turn up, and that's absolutely fine. Maybe for a new potential buyer or a new investor, somebody that they don't yet know, don't yet trust, they might take a kind of a holding fee. That's something I could see happening. Then maybe they'll take a £30-50 holding fee. And if you then don't turn up to a viewing, they'll say, right, you've lost that now, you're having to pay that to us. But if you turn up on time to the viewings, that's fine, because they're only going to be making money through the renting or selling of properties. An estate agency isn't going to actually become profitable just on allowing people to go and view properties. That's not going to really work for them, because that's going to put people off using them.
Yeah, and it's just all about a cycle, isn't it? This property cycle, and people get their knickers in a real twist when they see headlines or things change. People don't like change, right? And I think you're right when you say, look, when somebody arranges a viewing, the estate agent will probably get very frustrated about people not turning up or wasting their time. But it's only at this moment in time, in this particular cycle,
where everyone's in a frenzy for property.
Right. So estate agents could potentially sell properties 10 times over in some locations where they could probably say, well, actually, we can be a bit more picky about who we allow to view the properties.
And they have said this View Rabbit have said that, for highly sought after properties or in certain areas, they're going to charge even more than £30 just for a viewing. You might hate the house. You might get inside there and think, this is not for me at all. You're in and you're out in less than 5 minutes going, no, this isn't what I'm looking for. And you've just been charged 30, 50, maybe even £100 for the, for the privilege of doing that. It's not something that I can personally see catching on.
I can't either. But let's play devil's advocate and let's imagine a world and a market where they're across the board, agents are looking for you to pay to go and view a property. I mean, I think if it goes anywhere, maybe a holding deposit, like you say, pay us £50. If you turn up, you get it back. That seems, that's fair. That's reasonable. But this pay 30, 40
per viewing,
per viewing, right? Question number one: as an investor who's going to be buying at volume, would you pay it?
I would probably be doing more due diligence into properties before going to view them.
Yeah.
I think that would, instead of just going out and viewing with an estate agent and going, right, what have you got that's dirty, horrible, smelly? I'd be on the phone to the estate agent asking them questions before I were to go and view it. So I'd end up taking up a lot of estate agents' time without doing a viewing. So they'd probably get, because you'd be wanting to know about the vendor situation, you'd be wanting to understand their motivation, how much they owe on this property. Questions that they're probably not going to be able to ask you, to the point where they're thinking, you're taking up more of my time just on phone calls than you were by doing a 15-minute viewing with me for a property. So we're just going to let you walk. We're just going to let you walk in for free.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if I was to ask myself the same question, I think I would want to be working with agents that wouldn't charge me that. In that I've built the relationship enough. They know that I'm serious. They know I'm not a time waster, and therefore charging me a fee would just be, well, futile. It's not worth their time. Worth it to them. But I guess for a new client, like it could effectively be seen like a signing on fee, which we're going to get into dodgy territory with that though. As a new potential investor or buyer, they have to have a sort of signing on fee with that agent before they're allowed to then view properties. Well, let's face it, agents ask investors all the time, give us proof of funds to see if you're serious.
So surely giving, with proof of funds, a bank account or a letter from a broker, something along the line saying, you've got the funds ready to go, that should be enough for them to go, right, this is a serious person. Why do they need to start charging per viewing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, we always come back to this, James, don't we? That the professionals, the guys who are doing this properly and not making mistakes, they do operate at a different level to the masses. And I think if you always try and differentiate yourself or separate yourself from the masses, you are treated differently. Now, I know that sounds, like elitism, but actually we work very, very hard to put ourselves in a place where we have the relationships with the agents so that we are treated differently, so that we do get off-market deals coming to us, so that we can see properties before they ever even go onto the marketplace. That's kind of how this business operates. And for those of you that are looking to get into the market, that can sound frustrating for you because you're thinking, well, how do I get a chance to even build that relationship if they're not going to take me seriously? How do I get agents to take me seriously? And, we go round and round in circles unless you can demonstrate that you know what you're doing, you know exactly what you're looking for. And the way that you communicate with these agents, they won't take you seriously. So you have to really learn from people that are doing this correctly in order to then effectively move forward and build that relationship with those agents.
It reminds me a bit of when Purple Bricks first came into the market as well, as the first kind of nationwide estate agency saying, doesn't matter where you are, we're going to be able to sell your house for you. And it seemed a bit groundbreaking at the time. And it seemed as if, local estate agents were probably thinking, is this going to put us out of business? Are Purple Bricks going to take over and just be a nationwide selling agency, and they're not going to need us? And it then quickly transpired that, yes, Purple Bricks were just one agent that can sell the property in a particular area, but still a lot of people wanted to go to local people and deal with, your traditional estate agencies that have been there for 10, 15, 30 odd years. So it might seem revolutionary. Fair play to View Rabbit for trying something new, because you've got to, to see whether it works or not, you've got to actually give it a go. And they're probably going to get a load of negative press for doing this, but at least they're giving something a go. They're trying to separate themselves and do something that's a little bit new. And we should be applauding them for the idea of at least having some creativity in the market. Whether it works or not, they're trying to freshen things up.
And I think any kind of disruption in the marketplace is good. While people don't like change, while they don't like things that are uncomfortable because they haven't experienced them before, that is always a good thing for the marketplace. Because if that's your industry, if that's your business, then you have to make it your business, then learn with the changes. And then move and groove with that as it transpires. So for those of you that are just joining us, either in Clubhouse or in Facebook or in LinkedIn or on YouTube, welcome. You can ask us questions. We're going to be here with you for an hour. We're here every Wednesday night, normally about 5 till 6. The faces will change. The topics will change. Here at Property Wealth System, we're a collective of investors that are full-time investors and are here to give back and give as much information as we can to you.
I can see your comment just come through.
Who's that?
Parents of our students.
There we are. Perfect. So we've got a number of people who we already work with very closely, and some of you don't even know who we are. So this is your opportunity to get to know us. If you want to join us for a free webinar tomorrow night, that is available to you. And I've just put the link for registering your spot in the comments. I'll just share that on the screen there for you as well. For those of you in Clubhouse, you can click on either of our bios and there's a link, a bit.ly link in there for you as well. So keep the comments and the questions coming. But James and I, if you don't send us any questions, we're just going to keep talking about estate agents potentially charging us viewing fees, I guess is what they're calling them. As it turns out, it's only one agent that's talking about it, but we're fairly confident this is not going to be widespread. Yeah,
especially the fact that regulations already come into play about not being a letting agent, not being able to charge a tenant fees for signing on. I think they're going to find it really difficult to if they've been banned from charging fees for providing an actual service, going through a credit checking service and referencing and things. It's going to be really tough to start charging people just to go and view the properties. If this did become a kind of an estate agent wide fee, I think the government would probably dive in and form some kind of regulation and clamp down on it.
Yeah, well, let's face it, they took fees away from the letting agents, and that was around for long enough. So they probably would have something to say. So then, if we're quite comfortable with the idea of not being charged to view properties, how are we going to deal with the kind of transition we're in right now, where the market's been super, super, super hot, very, very competitive, lots of investors all viewing the same stock out there? How do you see that playing out, James, over the next quarter or so? Because the big thing that's changed since we last talked is, of course, the stamp duty holiday. Yeah,
and in most areas, well, it's really kind of only in higher value areas or higher value properties have we had a dramatic effect. This stamp duty change, it's going to change again in October. So there are certain, in the areas that I invest in, this change hasn't really had an effect yet because there aren't many properties selling for over, £500,000, which so it's dropped down to 250 at the moment. And what this is, it's kind of a it will, I think, signify a gradual cooling of the market. I think just the pace at which the market's been moving for the past year has been very, very fast. People have recognized that then they were maybe living somewhere they didn't like and not spending money. There was a bit more savings, a bit more in the pot to maybe upsize, and people are just kind of getting a house that they want.
Yeah.
And this is probably going to start signifying the end of that resi buyer bubble.
Yeah.
And it's going to sort of slowly transition back towards where it was, where we have an oversupply of properties on the market and less people looking for them, which is what we want as investors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think people are talking about a property crash coming because they've seen this bubble, this activity. But if you think about cycles, and from 2008, 2009, when there was that, if you want to call it crash, property prices, property values definitely dropped. And I experienced that because I was buying at the time. So my portfolio was losing value from 2008, 2009, 2010, even though I was still buying. So I don't envisage that happening after the pandemic. I don't see the property values or prices dropping in the way that it did back in 2008, 2009 times. It might cool, like you say.
There's no need for it to drop.
No, there's no need for it. And let's face it, let's talk about the monetary system and how that impacts the values of properties, because you've got way more money in the monetary system now. It's just being redistributed from people who've got businesses that failed or they've lost their livelihoods, and that's being redistributed to people who are smart and basically making money from this situation. I mean, the person who's got the whole PCR testing before you go on holiday, they're making a
making a killing, aren't they?
260 quid per traveler. They're getting the redistribution of wealth going their way for sure. But you've got so much money in the system now because the government have done all that quantitative easing to help people through this pandemic, that inflation just has to even things out. And that will have an impact.
There's been a lot of money printed off the back of furlough, and there's a lot of money that's come into the system. So naturally, off the back of that, you're going to see things get more expensive, because as there is more money in the system, it's still the same effectively percentage of money in the system that it's costing. It's just a numerically higher number. Yeah,
I'm really excited about the next 2 to 5 years, because we should have seen inflation from the quantitative easing in 2008, 2009. We should have felt some inflation to balance that out, and we haven't really felt it in 13 years. And then you have a monumental dumping of money into the system again now. And so it is inevitable that inflation has to happen. It has to happen. Yeah. It's just a question of how big and how quickly does it happen.
The government are going to want it to be controlled.
Very controlled. Well, they've got targets, right, that they have to meet, and they're going to want to keep that trickling in nice and gently as the economy can support it. So the country's really got to get back on its feet, and it's only going to really get back on its feet when theatres are open, restaurants, pubs, these are all at full capacity. They're performing as they should as businesses. And I think we're probably still maybe a few months off that, right? Still restrictions on various industries.
And I think one of the ways in which we might start, obviously, interest rates are still very low, and I think if the government wants to start stimulating and creating a bit more inflation, well, to see when we start seeing that inflation rise, I think interest rates will also have to go up in line with that as well.
Yeah, but the interest rates can only go up when people can afford it, right? And everyone's just so tentatively, think of the people who maybe have resi mortgages that in the pandemic have lost their jobs, and their interest rates are super low, and they're managing to make their resi mortgage payments just to no more, and they're literally clinging. That really, really does. Well, that will really worry the government. They can't go hell for leather, right? No. Open the floodgates, we're back in business too quickly, because people they're just not there yet.
They won't be able to afford it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there's eat all the money that's been effectively saved up, or all the furlough money will end up going back to the government through that kind of route.
Exactly. So I can't see the name of this person, but I think it's something to do with my StreamYard. But a Facebook user is saying that you don't think there'll be a crash, just a slow down in the market. We absolutely believe we're just calling
Marcus.
Is that Marcus? It's just a cool down after a hot summer. A really hot summer, it's just cooling, just chilling out. And it will be the professional investors that will be back just operating as normal. I mean, let's face it, James, we've carried on buying in this market. We've just had to adapt, change, maneuver in different directions. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's what it's been, and I think this part of it is also the cost of materials and things like when the manufacturing gets back to where it was at as well. That's gonna feel like a price drop because refurb costs are gonna reduce again.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I would say a lot of people who have maybe not been in a position to move and upsize their resi, they're actually spending money on their own house, aren't they? They're expanding, they're developing their own house.
Decent builders have got 2-3 month wait lists for work.
Yeah. It's hectic out there. I mean, the labor costs, I haven't seen a huge change in labor costs in my investment areas. No. All I've seen, and in fairness, why not? Because these guys could have started bumping up their labor costs, but it is more availability of materials.
100%, and that's we've seen that. We've seen like a 20-30% increase in refurb quotes being given to us.
Yeah, incredible. So how do we as investors cope with that, right? Because we couldn't have predicted if you purchased a property and you had a builder lined up ready to get the keys on completion pre-pandemic, pre-chaos. How do we as investors cope with suddenly material shortage, builders super busy, builders on site having to go off because they've tested positive for COVID, all of that stuff? How do we cope with that as investors?
I think it's about preparation is a big part of it, and keeping having a tried and tested build team helps. So for those of you that are already investing and you've got a good builder who is kind of reasonable on pricing, keep close to them, keep hold of them, don't let them go, because that's very, very valuable if you've got somebody that you've already got that relationship with. If not, it's about during the conveyance process actually making sure that you've got somebody lined up, because the conveyance process is taking longer because there are so many other people buying, solicitors are overworked, all that side of thing is also taking longer to go through. So making sure that once your offer's basically been accepted, as you're starting to go through conveyancing, getting a builder in, getting them to give you a quote, so that by the time you've actually got the keys, they've already given you a quote and you've said, right, can you start on this date? And they've gone, yep, I'll pencil you in the diary for 2 months time. Great, fantastic. We've then completed and they can go in and start straight away.
Yeah,
that's the sequencing that's really important. But you need to know before you've actually committed to buying the property what that's going to be worth. So you don't want to be exchanging contracts and then getting a quote for the refurb, because that could end up costing you 20-30% more than you would have expected, because there is a shortage of materials, because there is a shortage of builders, and you don't want to then end up overpaying for something that you didn't really need to.
Yeah, you have to start with the end in mind, and this is we're always training people, aren't we, James, about plan for the worst, expect the best. So if you think that a refurb, and you've been quoted a refurb, is going to be £15,000, maybe having a contingency of £2,000 to £3,000 is a really sensible thing to do, just in case, unforeseen circumstances. So, for example, we had one of our HMO developments. It was like a cookie cutter approach. We'd done loads before, the same builder, they knew the buildings. But when they ripped everything back to brick, they recognized that one of the bay windows at the front of the building needed underpinned. And there's no way any surveyor would have been able to pick that up pre-purchase. There's no way that we could have known that. There was no one's fault.
No signs, no evidence.
That's no one's fault. But because we had that contingency and we had the quote for what it would then cost to underpin, then it wasn't, it's not disastrous. And I think that preparation and being ready for things that might, come out of the woodwork, as they say, no pun intended, then at least you're ready, and it's not going to make or break a deal, because we've got a big enough contingency there. And of course, profit margin. If your profit margin that you want from a flip is £10,000, and then you eat into, say, a £3,000 contingency, you've suddenly maybe done a flip that might even take 4, 5, 6 months for £7,000.
Yeah.
And that's not worth it, is it?
No.
So, right, your profit margins.
But then, I guess, again, playing devil's advocate on that, people are going to say, but there aren't any deals out there at the moment to be able to get that level of profit that I want on a flip. So I'm just going to do one for 8, 10 grand because that's all that's available right now.
Oh my goodness. What do you say about that? I mean,
go hunting elsewhere, look harder.
Yeah. That's like, you're looking for a wife and you're not finding any decent ones, so I'll just marry that one over there.
Or I'll settle for a husband.
So you wouldn't do it, would you?
No.
So why do it with properties? I think, again, how many times have we heard people, I just need to get one deal over the line so I get the experience and then I'll do better ones next. It's like,
but if it's a bad deal and it ends up costing you more than it could do, if you end up, having a bad experience with that will probably scar you from property for life.
It would. And we have seen people really damaged, and then they have preconceived ideas, property doesn't work, there are no deals, all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, it's hunting in the right place. I refuse to believe when someone says to me there are no deals out there, they are not doing everything that we tell them to do.
Yeah.
They're just not, because the evidence is there for speaking direct to vendors in the area, right? It doesn't even need to be leafleting. It can be in other ways. We've had people out on mentorship recently who started speaking to neighbors, who then had a daughter, who then had.
I know somebody that's selling it, or somebody that owns a property down the road. I think on one of Jordan's mentorships, he said that cropped up.
Yeah, exactly. So the off-market deals are still there, because let's list some of the reasons why someone would rather sell their house to you than use an estate agent to sell their house, even though they know they're probably going to get more money for their property if they go down the estate agent's route. What are the benefits of going direct to you? Yeah.
Speed is one of the big ones. I think saving on fees is another thing, but somebody would be, if they genuinely thought that we're going to be getting an extra £20,000-30,000 by putting it through an estate agency, it would be very silly of them to fear paying a £2,000-3,000 fee.
Yeah.
But
so
some people are short-sighted in that way.
So we've got speed, we've got cost. So they're saving money, they're saving time. So there's two biggies. For me, I think it is privacy. Privacy. So lots of people sell their houses and they do not want people knowing that they're selling their house or moving.
Nosing about, looking at the house on Rightmove.
So think, I haven't moved house that often in my lifetime, but if I was to move house now, that would be a stressful experience, packing up your entire life. But before that, of course, you got to minimalize your house.
Yeah,
keep everything out.
Keep it clean and tidy for months on end while people come around and do viewings. That's not possible, is it?
Tidying your cupboards. Well, I know I should have done that in lockdown, but I had better things to do, like eating and drinking too much. So you're tidying the cupboards, you're having to keep everything tidy. I've even had friends who are selling their house, putting the ironing board in the car, putting their dirty washing in the car, putting the bins in their car, because actually there's nowhere really to store that. Yeah.
If we leave it out, they're going to think, there's not enough storage in this property, we don't want to buy it because there isn't storage.
Right. So you've got the hassle factor of basically tidying your house, right? So you've got that time, cost, hassle, but then the nosiness. They're putting their house out there on the internet for everyone
to have a look at, everyone to critique.
And then everyone now knows the price you're asking.
Yeah.
And there are some people out there that are a little bit protective of that information. It's a bit crass to talk about money. People knowing
because even on Rightmove, even when you start looking at the sold prices, some of the stuff that we've bought direct to vendor doesn't show up on the Rightmove sold stuff. So unless someone really wants to pay money to find out how much you paid for that property through Land Registry, they have no way of actually finding out.
Yeah,
it's not just there.
Yeah. Paul Kingham's here saying, spot on. My mum's neighbour sold her house at a massive discount just for the privacy. Sadly, not to you. Lesson learned. Start speaking to your mum's neighbours. Yeah, so that's another reason. So we've got price, time, hassle, privacy, anything else? Anything else? I think they're four big ones.
They're the big ones, yeah. I think it's kind of speed and time, as you say. It's your time, but it's also the knowing, the certainty of knowing, right, we've got somebody that's going to just buy it from us straight up.
Yeah.
The guarantee almost.
Yeah. And in Scotland, of course, the seller's report, or what we call,
do you have to have if you're buying direct to vendor in Scotland, do you have to still have a home report?
No.
So that's a financial saving.
Some lenders might ask for it, but no.
If you were buying it cash or buying it with a bridge, that wouldn't be an issue either.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. So best deal that you've done ever in London during lockdown was direct to vendor. Yes.
That's Alpin.
That's brilliant. Okay, so here we have people that are clearly looking to sell their properties. They probably know they're going to get more money going to an agent, but they just don't want to. And I think if most investors, when they're starting out, can get their heads around that that's what people really look for, then they're like, oh, right, this whole direct to vendor thing really can work. It's just you've got to pimp yourself out there.
You've got to put a bit more legwork in.
Yeah.
And that it's not really favourable for the lazy people.
Yeah, for the lazy people, well, they're not going to be property investors right now, right? Because they're
still looking on www.cheaphousesforsale.co.uk and going, there's nothing here.
That's my favourite website. Yeah, so okay, there are deals out there.
Yeah.
Any other avenues apart from direct to vendor? I mean, they are our favourite because you can really negotiate and structure the deal for a win-win.
It is about the structure as well, isn't it? Whereas you don't get that with an estate agent. If you were to turn up, I'm sure if you were to turn up to a View Rabbit viewing and say, hi, I'd like to buy this property, but I actually don't want to buy it right now. I want to buy it in 5 years' time, and I'm going to babysit the mortgage payments over the next 5 years. They would tell you to jog on. They would say, absolutely, what have you been smoking? Can we have some? Because it just wouldn't, they just wouldn't allow you to structure the deal creatively whatsoever.
So for those of you that don't know, what James has just described is a lease option, effectively an advanced deal structure for securing a property and profiting from it without actually owning it. And
being able to buy it in the future at today's price.
Yes. So estate agents obviously get paid on the sale price, and you're saying, well, I'll buy it in the future. So there's a conflict of interest there. And I think you're right. Estate agents' job, their game is to sell properties. So if we were to try and do an assisted sale, for example, or do something a bit more creative, they're just not there on the level of knowledge that we would be when we can speak to vendors. And
they're looking at themselves. They're kind of thinking, well, if we were to run, let's say, an assisted sale, we're only going to be getting one payday, whereas if we push for a sale and then push for a second sale, we can be getting 2 paydays.
There we go. Those of you that don't know what an assisted sale is, don't worry. Join us tomorrow night, bit.ly/PWS-Thursday, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that potentially. So for those of you that are just joining us, we are live across many platforms from Clubhouse, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Mm-hmm. So you can ask us questions in the usual manner. Just pop the comments in the question box and the little comments box there. They pop up in front of us, and we are open to discuss all things property. Tonight we have started down the estate agents charging £30 per viewing route, but we've kind of diverted away from how we're sourcing deals in the current market, where we see the current market going. What about lending, James? You talked about interest rates. So if we're thinking that inflation is potentially going to keep creeping up, because effectively it has to.
Yeah.
What do you think the mortgage market is going to do? Because in actual fact, mortgages are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
There's only a point they can only go so low. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where the banks say, here, have the money for free. Or say, we'll actually pay you to take out a mortgage. I just can't see that happening. Unfortunately, it'd be great. And I don't think we'll get to the point, certainly not for a long time, where banks' mortgage rates are going to be X% below base rate, as they were back in kind of 2006, 2007. Banks were saying the rate would have been, let's say, 1% below base rate.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's going to be coming into play anytime soon because base rate is too low.
Yeah.
And they're going to be very wary that that's not going to be financially viable for them. The banks can only offer a service if they're making money.
Yeah.
So I'm of the opinion that they can only go one way. And for that reason, if you're happy with the property, if you're not planning on releasing any equity from it, lock in for as long as you can.
Interesting. Well, I've literally just changed product with a lender on one of our HMOs, and I had the option of a 2-year or 5-year. That was it. Only 2 options, 2-year and 5-year. And I think it was a difference of like 50 quid cash flow between the two. So if I locked in for 2 years, I'd get 50 quid extra cash flow. If I locked in for 5 years, I'd be 50 quid worse off.
Yeah.
And off the top of my head, I think it was 4.38% for 5 years on an HMO.
Yeah.
And Nick's always said, oh, whenever I've fixed for too long, I've always regretted it. But bear in mind, we've only been doing this professionally since 2008.
It's the certainty of just knowing that that's what my cash, it's not my cash flow, that's what my mortgage payment's going to be for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And for £50, I'd kind of take that instead of thinking, well, in 2 years' time, what's going to happen to the rates? I might end up paying a lot more. I might end up paying £50 more for 3 years, and that's going to eat away. So, or £100 more for the 3 years. So I just say, well, I'll just take it.
And then you look at the redemption penalties, because I think, the power of having those multiple exits, that we're holding on to these properties, but we like the idea of we could sell them if we really wanted to. What the redemption penalty would be in that period that you've fixed for. And we weighed it all up. And my biggest regret is selling any assets. We have sold properties over the years, and I've always regretted it. And so I'm like, yeah, we're going to fix for 5 years. Let's fix for 5 years. So we've fixed for 5 years on that one. But I do like it sort of mixed up a little, just to give you that diversification to change your mind on various things.
Would you ever the market would have to be really ridiculously crazy for you to contemplate selling a cash flowing HMO, though?
Well, you say that, but I have just done that because in one location I was a little overexposed. I had far too many, and it was getting to the point where actually one was always sticking a little on the rent. We always filled it, but it just took a little bit more effort to fill it. And prices were going so crazy. We were like, well, actually, we know what we could get using that cash elsewhere now. So we liquidated at least one of them. But yeah, you're right. Under normal circumstances, why would you ever do that? And I think having bought in 2008 and 2009, if you had cash in a recession, that set you up really, really well.
Yeah.
Because there was going to come opportunities that you needed the cash for. So I think for our safety, and this is just purely a sort of mindset from our point, is having a bit of a cash reserve just in case we need to jump on something, and cash is king at that point. But you're always going to be able to find money elsewhere anyway.
Especially at the moment, because obviously in 2008 it was a different style of crisis.
Exactly.
And money was a lot more sparse. You wouldn't see people having more money in their bank account than they previously would have done.
Yeah.
Whereas this time round, we've had a crisis, but people end up, cash flow positive off the back of the crisis. A lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people have ended up with more money in their bank accounts now than they did this time last year.
There's, like you say, James, there's probably going to be a spend frenzy coming up, because I've got a friend who's a jeweler. And he says, I've never been so busy, because, a woman's sitting there with her husband and they're choosing between 2 different rings. And he's like, well, we haven't been able to go to New York last year, and we've missed our summer holiday, and we've not spent on those holidays. So why don't you just spend it on the ring, for the bigger one, right? So he's making loads of money. Again, people are just looking for spending their money.
Spend their money, yeah.
Yeah, shiny, bling, bling, bling. Holidays. Jewelry.
Yeah,
the
same. No, a jeweler, and he's just been worked off his feet this last year.
Yeah.
So
really interesting.
That's a people will find a way to spend their money. And BBC had an article and they called it revenge spending. People saying, I'm just going to spend money because I've got it and I've not been able to for so long.
Sounds quite aggressive.
Really aggressive. Revenge spending.
Revenge spending. I'm going to buy that bigger ring. There
Just,
you go.
Just because I can, and I've not been able to go out for dinner for the last 6 months. It's kind of a treat yourself mentality, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, the strategies we're seeing absolutely rocket in the UK right now is, of course, serviced accommodation, which was actually affected the worst in the pandemic. So it's kind of like the pendulum has swung the other way, where they really struggled when there was no one coming to stay for short term, and then it's completely swung the other way. And because people are still a little apprehensive about going overseas, I mean, I know that first chance you get, you'll be on a plane out of here, but the admin behind
I'm not sure if I can be bothered with the admin and the PCRs and when you're there, you might end up. I got stung last year with having to quarantine for 2 weeks, so I'm kind of like, nah.
Well, this is it. I think a lot of people think like that. I've just been away myself, and I would say the holiday admin, I call it holiday admin, which is always Nick's job, was insane.
Yeah.
Insane. And you've got the extra costs of all these PCR tests, and not that that should be a consideration, but it is a bit of a pain.
The uncertainty of am I going to be able to go back to normal life as soon as I come back home, or am I going to have to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks?
There we go. So people are doing the staycation thing, right? And well, our hotel, the occupancy in July has been crazy, and we only just opened it in the pandemic. What do you think, James, about people who are thinking about getting started in property and just going straight into service accommodation, or a rent to SA? Or
I fear for the lack of knowledge that they're going into it with. It's one of the more, or it can be one of the more complex strategies, because there's so much more moving parts. You're going to need a bigger team. Unless you want a job for yourself, I wouldn't be recommending that as a starting strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody actually challenged me once because I said, serviced accommodation is a cash flowing strategy, so it should fall under the passive income umbrella. But in actual fact, how passive is it? I guess you've got one foot in the hospitality business and you've got one foot in the property business. Depends on the systems and the people and the team, like you say.
It depends if you work on the business or if you work in the business.
Yeah. I think if it's serviced accommodation on your doorstep, you would just naturally get sucked into it, wouldn't you?
100%. Yeah, because you just think, I can just go in and let these people in. You might start with having a cleaner in place and just say, well, I can just go in and let the people in and do the changeovers. And then it becomes, well, why am I paying a cleaner? I could just change the sheets. I could just wash them, and you end up taking them home. And it will then limit the speed at which you can go at it. Will stop you from wanting to, build a portfolio of these, because you're thinking, I'm going to have to let how many people in? I'm going to have to, clean how many sets of bedding and do all of that extra work? No. I'll just stick with one. And it's the not being able to see the big picture element that will restrict you from being able to actually size up the portfolio.
And service accommodation is sexy because you do get an awful lot more income coming in, but of course something else happens, and that's your costs.
Your costs are high,
much higher as well,
and it can be seasonal as well. So if you're looking for a steady cash flow to begin with, which is what most of my students that are starting out just say, we want something steady, we just sort of want almost that guaranteed income coming in. Service accommodation isn't going to give you that guarantee, because certain months are going to be fantastic, but other months aren't going to be great. And if you're not used to the highs and lows, you're going to spend the money when it comes in, and then you're not going to have enough money to kind of cover the mortgage, cover your costs when you're not in the as good months.
Yeah. I mean, just the agent's fees alone, if you decide to be quite hands off and have an agent manage all of it, they can be substantial, the agent's fees. Some of them can charge 50% of your profit after costs. I mean, obviously not an agent that we would use, but some of them can. If there's going to be quite a bit of turnover. So when Edinburgh has the festival, agents, bumper time, they are charging 20-25% plus on agent on management, and that's all the income coming in, of course, which is considerably higher. So their fees go up, and it's the passive income element on serviced accommodation is kind of a point that we could debate on how passive actually is it.
Yeah.
Because it's quite reliant on, occupancy levels. There'll be different occupancy levels, as you say, in different seasons. Do you have to get a little bit more actively involved in, say, marketing? And
it's not a kind of do the work once and then forget about the property existing strategy.
Yeah. So we've got one question. What about rent to SA though? So same costs, same setup costs as if you purchased it and owned that property. It's just the actual controlling of the property, if you like, the asset, is done in a different way to if you physically owned it.
You've still got to rent it out as the service accommodation. So you've still got that marketing to think about. You've still got the highs and lows of the non-steady cash flow to be thinking about, the who's going to go in and look after it. You've also got if the property's damaged, I'm going to have to be giving it back to the original owner in the condition that I got it. So I'm going to potentially be out of pocket on a property that I don't even own.
Yeah. But Mark Winship, who's our Property Wealth Systems resident SA expert, his very, very, very first deal after he was trained and mentored was rent to SA. And I think lots of people starting out love the idea of this rent to rent, regardless of what your exit is, be it SA, be it buy to let, be it multi-let, HMO, whatever it is, because you're controlling an asset rather than owning it. So you don't need that big deposit, the stamp, all the conveyancing costs and everything else, but ultimately you do not own that asset. So
if it goes up in value, you're not feeling that part of, I think the benefit to owning property is it's an asset class that will give you income, but it will also appreciate over the long term of owning it.
Yeah. So any capital cost spent. So as James said, if someone leaves it a little bit messy and then you have to then spend to refurb and make it pretty again, you don't get the benefit of that. The vendor it could be a capital improvement on it. But it is still a viable strategy depending on your circumstances.
Yeah.
If you've got the option to purchase the property or do rent to rent, and the outcome is exactly the same, I'd much rather buy it and go and get resourceful to raise the money for the stamp and the deposit and what refurb and setup costs you want. I'd much rather own it than just control it. Yeah. I can't see who asked that question, but if you can say your name and ask specifically about what you're looking at. Yeah. Specifically what you're looking at and why is that. But let's think about how many landlords right now will want to get out of the property business and want to sell up because
they're thinking, well, I can be selling my assets for as much as they've ever been worth. So now's probably a good time to get out. Yeah.
So guest house owners, small hoteliers, bed and breakfast owners, these guys have had a rubbish time. They're probably owner occupiers and they're thinking, well, this house is actually probably too big for us now anyway, and I can't be bothered doing another busy season with all the breakfasts and getting up early and doing all the changeovers, and they're wanting to get out. So there's opportunities there, but of course those will be probably listed elsewhere.
Yeah, they're not going to be on just sort of your bog standards move, are they?
Yeah, so you've got to be searching in the relevant places for the strategy you're looking for. So any questions you guys have got, by all means, pop them in the comments box. We've got about another 10 to 15 minutes with you. So any topic, you can tell we're just having a good chat here, a little chin wag about all things property. Anything that you want to speak to us about, by all means, put it in the question box there. And there's the option for coming on our webinar tomorrow night as well, if you want another 90 minutes of content like this. So
Richard said, here we go. Looking at rent to SA more locally as our investment area has been a mare for buy to let. Get that.
Yeah.
Smelly properties going at asking price or higher, close to dump value. Yeah. That's something that we've seen as well. And it's kind of a case of having to, not getting sucked into thinking, well, if that's what we're going to be buying a smelly house for, it's going to be worth more when it's done up. So we're just going to buy it anyway and hope that we get a good, a good valuation on it later down the line.
It's not your kinds of investing. So,
Yeah.
for the amateur guys who are just buying for yield and are just happy to park their money and park their capital, then yeah, they can pay asking price or higher, and then spend on the refurb and then just sit and wait it out. But they're really going to stunt their growth. They're really going to stunt the scalability of their business by doing that, unless, of course, they're changing the use of the property.
Yeah,
they're changing the use of the property from resi to HMO, then that's different, because you can force the appreciation by adding considerable value by the end use of the property. So yes, if you're changing your strategy from buy to let, why specifically rent to SA though in your local area? Because it's too expensive to buy. So you're thinking maybe.
And rent. Is your local area, is there are you investing there or wanting to operate service accommodation there because it's your doorstep or because it's a good area for that strategy?
Yeah, because when it is close to you, you're going to get sucked in. Meeting and greeting and all of that stuff that goes on with it. That's as an investor, you've got to really hold back from getting sucked into the daily running of an SA. You want to try and systemize it as much as possible. Great question from Facebook user. Can you see the name there?
Raj.
Okay. How do you get out of the mindset that this lady doesn't want you to do what you need to do? How do you pick yourself up and get out and do what you have to do? How? Okay. So is this that you are in a relationship with someone that is kind of holding you back and saying property's not for you, and then you're wanting to do it? Because we have that a lot, right, James?
Yeah.
You've got one person who is super keen, wants to do it, and then the other person not so keen. They are not wanting you to do that. We have that a lot. Okay, so negativity or people kind of pissing on your parade is, I guess, the way that I would say, don't share your goals, dreams, aspirations with people who aren't going to support and facilitate you. Now, if you're married to them, that is very, very challenging, because a marriage is a partnership in so many ways. So you've got four choices. And you're probably not going to like all of these choices. Somebody's saying get rid of her. Not always an option. That's quite an expensive option too.
It might, it could prove to be very expensive.
Very expensive. So your four options are: do it without her knowing about it. Just don't tell her you're doing it.
Keep it quiet.
Just don't tell her. So that's option one. Make sure if you do that you have a network of people who are super supportive, super encouraging, that do this day in, day out. Don't just talk about it, but actually do it.
Yeah.
And that can facilitate and help you, because it's a really lonely business and it's tough, right? So if you're going to do it without telling her, then get a network for sure. Second option, do it, tell her, and she kicks off, and you have to live in quite a toxic, hard, tough environment that you just have to put up with. And then there's a bigger thing at question here. This is not about property. It's about actually the relationship, isn't it? Right? So that's your second option. Your third option is sit down, explain to her, I'm doing this. I respect you. And if you love and respect me, you'll support me in the background, even though I know that you're very, very uncomfortable with this, but you'll support me in the background because you love and trust me. That's your third option. And she kind of gets on board a little with that.
Or
and then
start doing it and they kind of work their way around, and they might have started out negative, but they're then kind of going, I get what you're doing here, and I'm coming on board with you on this.
Yeah. And they're like, not so, because we had a student not that long ago, and he was gung-ho, I'm going to do this. Wife was like, I'm not so sure about this. And he's done incredible things, and she's still not that convinced about it. She just doesn't like the business. She just doesn't like it. It feels uncomfortable to her because it's, mortgage debt and things like that. And then your fourth and final option is
don't do it.
Don't do it. Keep her happy. But I don't know how fulfilled you're going to feel in that relationship, or, you know, how happy you'll be with that. So who's saying the third option is the best?
I think Marcus has said the third option is the best. The third option is the best. Well, the first option of doing it and then not telling them and them not finding out at all is going to give you the least headache, as long as they don't find out. So, you know, arguably that's the best. But yeah, you know, if you can, but if that's not an option, if they're adamant that they're never going to come around to it, then, you know, you decide, is it going to be option 2 or option 4, basically.
Yeah, I love you, I respect you, and I know that you trust me, that I won't make any mistakes and I won't risk anything that you're scared of losing. And if there's still massive friction there, then it's not a property, it's actually the relationship that is in question here. The fourth one's not an option. Yes, go on then.
That's the right attitude to have, yeah.
And I love that. They always find out. Of course, women always find out everything. But once you're like treating them to the bling, 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 taking them out for dinners, and maybe they're experiencing a bit of a different lifestyle because of you doing it, maybe they'll come around to this, maybe this property thing ain't so bad anymore, right?
It's often... the kind of the negativity can often be out of fear. So as Caroline said there, kind of letting somebody know that you're ring fencing things, we're not going to risk what we built, this is a completely separate entity, you know, that might just be enough to go, okay, we'll have a go then.
James, we've been training people for, well, over a decade. You're like 7-8 years. We have seen relationships fall apart over this. But we've actually seen marriages as well, right? Yeah. So for every divorce we've seen, we have seen marriages as well.
There's a 1-to-1 ratio, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a 1-to-1 ratio. And look, it's never about the property investing that is the issue here. It's about fundamentally, as a partnership, having very different values and goals and aspirations. And I think if you have very, very different goals and aspirations and values, would it have worked as a relationship anyway? Yeah.
It's the kind of the risk mentality.
There we are. I know.
Yeah, where's their head at for this kind of the appetite for personal expanse?
The other thing is, and it sounds a bit radical, but I'm going to go there because I'm radical, is that maybe you shouldn't try and convince them. Maybe you let someone else try and convince them, because let's face it, wives don't listen to husbands, just like children don't listen to parents, right? So rather than you try and tell them this is the best thing for your family and your future and your freedom and all that stuff, maybe get them involved in a network of people who can basically educate or why it's something. Let someone else do the hard work. Leverage someone else to do it.
I had one of my students recently. He was dead set on doing this, and he kind of brought his guest on the 3-day intensive with the purpose, not for her to kind of go, I really want to do this with you. It was just so she could kind of go, I get why you're wanting to do this, and I get that you're doing it in a safe way. You're not just going out there throwing loads of money that isn't really ours out there and hoping that something works. And he got to the point, she, you know, by the end of 3 days, she was like, I really want you to become a successful property investor, and I'm supportive of you, but I'm not going to be partaking. And, you know, maybe if I see this work and I see you actually, I get that you're getting the knowledge on how to do this. When I've actually seen that knowledge transpire into actions that are successful, maybe at that point I'll jump on board and help you.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite common that people are like, I just don't know if this is for me, but I'm super excited for you to do it because it sounds like quite hard work. So you can do all the work and I'll reap the benefits.
Pretty much.
Exactly. So we're coming to the end of our 1 hour live.
Yeah.
We never know what direction it's going to go in. We never know who's going to come on a Wednesday night. So always make sure that you set up for alerts, certainly on our Facebook
community page,
for these lives to come up. If there's any topics that you would like to hear us talk about, also in our clubhouse rooms as well, then by all means, let us know. You can give us feedback on the Facebook group in that community. So, James, it's always a pleasure.
Lovely to have spent some time with all you this evening, and you as well, Caroline.
There we go. Exactly. So if you want to hear more about what James and I have been talking about tonight, then there is a link there on the screen, bit.ly/PWS-Thursday. Thanks, Darren. And I will look forward to seeing some of you at some point in the future. And like I say, just let us know what you'd like us to talk about. Wednesday nights, about 5 till 6, we'll be here. And you can rewatch this if you miss it as well. So have a great evening, guys. Thanks, James.
See you later. Bye.
See you soon.